thrilled to be here with my friend, Christy Renee. I want to say dear friend, Christy, even though we met one time for 30 minutes and it was ever so quickly, but within a matter of moments, we just were sharing and connecting on a level that it's almost unheard of when you're talking to a stranger. So I am so grateful to be here with you. I am so grateful for what you're going to be sharing today. And y'all, the reason why I'm particularly excited is because Christy Renee was actually introduced to us by a wonderful mutual friend who said that there's actually a lot of resonance in what she and I both offer and talk about in terms of emotional intelligence, in terms of branding. And so I love meeting a fellow soul that's really gotten a similar clarity around a topic that is so meaningful and passionate for me. And so what we're going to be talking about specifically today is how do we piece the stories together? How do we identify what are those stories that are intrinsic to us, that are unique to us, the parts that really make us shine? And Christy Renee is incredibly stellar at doing this, not just for others, but for herself. She really leads from and with examples. So Christy, welcome. I'm so happy to be with you.
Thank you. I'm really happy for this conversation and the pre-conversation. You got me in my feels. I'm here. As you know, I'm developing this keynote for
Yes.
this women's audience next week, and I've known that I can show up and it would be amazing. I know that I can show up and share what I want to share and it would be an amazing time, but I've been really committed to going deep into my vulnerability. Really, like, I've lived a lot of lives. I've had just a lot of stories and things that I can bring to any conversation, but I felt really called that there are certain messages, certain parts of my story to deliver at this women's audience, with the theme of a time to win, empowerment,
Wow.
achievement, and celebration. And I've just been deep in the process of what does this audience need to hear? And how can I be my most vulnerable self with shame and transformation and just everything? And I'm so grateful for how it's been flowing through and just really
Yay.
excited to have this conversation today to get all the juices flowing before I just go practice.
Yes, yes. Let's get those juices flowing. Christy, I have had a number of guests on the show where they just mention shame, and we don't necessarily go super deep. So I want to go deep for however long we need to. Deep doesn't mean we stay there, but for however long we need to stay on this topic, I'd love to, because so many parts of what incorporates a good story, what a good story is predicated upon, is the kind of the ashes, the places of the dark night of the soul, the places that frankly we usually want to hide and that we don't want to talk
Mhm,
about.
mhm,
And
mhm.
shame often lives there. So can you
Yeah.
talk about shame specifically in regards to your stories that maybe you wouldn't have wanted to bring light to, that shame is ultimately hiding?
Whew. Yes, of course. Yes, I mean, you're spot on. Yes, those are the areas we want to hide. And what I
Mm,
have found is that, I'm leading this audience through this idea of how to thrive in disruption, how to really look at whether, the audience is women in business. So whether you're a career professional or you're a business leader, we are dealing with a disrupted market, right? I learned that 52%, over half of the market right now, is worried about being replaced by AI. And
mhm,
we don't know what's going to happen next, right? Without going too much into my story of how many times the rug has been pulled out from under me, and
mhm,
I've just grown through it and I've been able to transform and rise to a different industry. It really comes, the first principle in what I teach is knowing yourself, knowing your identity. And when shame is hiding, when it's lurking in these dark shadows,
mm.
we're prevented from a knowingness, to use your word, knowing of ourself. And yeah, I, as a leader, that I'm sure that you can relate to this, as a leader that does go deep and hold space vulnerably, it requires us to work on our stuff at a very deep level, right? And so I don't know that there's an end to it. It always seems like, growth is an onion. We're always peeling back layers.
Mm,
And I've, yeah, had some really good work. EFT tapping is very powerful. It's
mm,
something that I love to do with a practitioner who's very close to my heart. And it's helped me to eradicate some of the shame that I still carry so that I can be
Yeah.
vulnerable and share this story of transformation. And, to share it here first, a big part of that is I was an early adopter of Instagram, and that
Mm,
with that came a lot of likes, a lot of comments. I was traveling the world at the time, and I created this alter ego of me
mm,
where the attention,
mm,
cleavage equaled attention and attention
mm,
equaled love.
mm,
And I think that that's important because we live in this social media world where we are consumed with putting our best self out there. And I think that often that best self we're putting out there is not our truest self. And that creates this divide that makes it very hard to grow.
yes. Yes. Yeah. How can you grow if you don't even know the baseline? Dr. Jeff Spencer, he was the performance coach for Lance Armstrong, among many others. And he and I worked together for a little bit, and he called it a goal positioning survey, where we effectively take a survey and analysis of where am I starting and who am I now, for us to then be able to identify, okay, where do I even want to get to? But I have to know where I am today, because otherwise we can never grow if we're operating from a
Hmm.
disparate and disconnected
Hmm.
self.
Hmm.
We're going to
Hmm.
be growing all these, to your point, like attention equals love. Well, then we're going to be focusing on the wrong benchmarks to measure success, that's disconnected from the truth of, well, what is love actually? So it's
Hmm.
the knowing of ourselves and the knowing of what we really want, because otherwise we are
Hmm.
going to be chasing the wrong KPIs, the wrong metrics.
And when we chase the wrong things, we're never fulfilled, It's like
Yeah.
that was one of the biggest
Yeah.
lessons I learned. I was always looking for happiness out there, right?
Mm,
I achieved the American dream at a very young age. I had a long-term partner, a house, everything but the white picket fence, and that didn't fulfill me. So I thought, okay, let's have the millennial dream. Let's go travel the world. I experienced 30 countries before my 30th birthday. I
wow.
traveled 20 countries in 11 months, and guess what?
Oh my
Happiness wasn't at the end of that either. And then I was like, I need to go live in a city. That's where happiness will be. I need to live in the exotic city of Barcelona for a year. Then I will be fulfilled. Then I will be happy.
Yes.
And at the end of that journey, I was happy. But you know why? Because I learned that happiness wasn't anywhere else on this dang planet. Happiness was
Mm,
in knowing myself. And when I did come back, I say, I had nothing, but I had everything because I was
mm,
connected to who I was. And that is the
wow.
richest, most fulfilling thing we can
Yes.
do.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I have myself. I know what you mean in terms of having the travel that actually really unveiled some aspects about us. I had this moment when I was really missing home one time while I was traveling, and then I realized in that moment I was like, oh, I can be my own home. My own,
Mhm.
like I can be that safe place for me to go and retreat and be alone, and I can effectively be the haven for my own soul. And for so long as we're looking external, man, it's just we're constantly setting ourselves up for, I don't even want to say failure, because I actually think failure is really a good thing.
Mhm.
And that failure, I'm working to fundamentally change my view of failure to be something that is actually desired. And part of my KPIs of success is that I'm failing as I go.
Yeah, I agree.
Apart from doing that and realizing that we're setting ourselves up for, just, how would you put it, like continuous disappointment, continuous unfulfillment.
Yeah, I think fulfillment is the word for me. I don't know if it resonates with
Mm,
everybody, but I agree totally with failure. The difference between the people who are where you want to be is the amount of times they failed for it and how fast and willing
mm,
they are to fail, right? So I agree with that. It's not a failure, but you're setting yourself up for continued disappointment, lack of fulfillment. And I remember the feeling, it's just like empty. It's
mm,
like, well, what's next? What's next? And it's just, for me,
yeah,
it was this feeling of never enough with whatever it was. And
yeah.
that's not a great way to live.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so tell me about that, because with you're saying never enough. Yesterday, I had an amazing conversation with a gentleman who likened this whole topic of like the chasing and the pursuing and striving for the attention, which equaled love, but that's not really how we get love. That's not the real definition of it. But he likened it to a scoreboard. Like he was a professional athlete. And so the score literally on the board dictated his worth and whether he was worthy of receiving love. And so we can look at the scoreboard of social media with likes and comments, shares, etc. And then how have you been able to really allow for the feeling of I am enough regardless of what the scoreboard looks like?
Yeah, great question. It has been a constant evolution. I wouldn't say that, it's all the way, that it never messes me up anymore. I'll say that. It's
Yes.
never I won't say that I do it perfectly. For a few years, I took a break from social media entirely, and I was like, "Problem solved. I don't feel this way anymore."
Yes.
And then, of course, as entrepreneurs, it is not only a great way to have reach and share your message, but also what it did for me personally in the spectrum of self-expression. I look back at my life and the things that I've overcome, all of the things that I was most scared of, aside from heights, has been public expression.
Wow.
So speaking, and for me not being on social media, it was avoiding the issue, but it was also preventing me from the expression that I need. I'm a writer, I'm a speaker, I got a lot of words, I got a lot of stories, and if they're not coming out of
Yeah.
me often enough, I get this like buzzing feeling of just
Mhm.
overthinking and feeling
Wow.
overstimulated. So for me, I've really switched the perspective from I'm doing this outwardly to get likes, to resonate with people. Is this good enough for you guys?
Mhm.
Versus, well, I'm doing this because when I'm fully expressed, I feel in flow. And when I feel in flow, magic happens. And so switching that lens from external validation to intrinsic motivation has really been how I've been navigating it.
I love the difference between validation versus motivation because something external could still motivate us, for example, an impact or something of the kind, but you're being ultimately at the end of the day, you're being driven from within, perhaps for an
Mhm.
external impact or end goal, but it's not the external motivating and validating agent. Like I love that difference between validation and motivation. That's so, so, so
Mhm.
good. Have you with so let's back up a little bit because I love kind of where you've been arriving, but I want to go back to some of those core stories, those core moments in your life. And one of the things that I've really been leaning into over the last couple of days specifically actually has been this process of story making. We talk about storytelling, but there's so much opportunity when we know our stories well enough to then make the big picture of them. For example, you're working on your keynote, you're making the keynote by way of pulling the pieces from your stories and putting
Mhm.
it together. I liken it to the Japanese art form of effectively mending broken pieces of
Yes.
pottery
Say.
with gold seams, which is called kintsugi. And so effectively, we get to do that with what seems like ruins to everyone around us, what we might
Mhm.
even judge as ruins at first blush, but realizing that there's actually a really precious gem in that story. And so if we gold piece them together with the
Mhm.
gold and that bonding agent, we now have this beautiful masterpiece of a story. And then it's okay, let's now make something even bigger. Got to make the story and then make
Mhm.
something such as your keynote. So, can you talk to us about that process that you've gone through of making the story and then seeing how they all fit together to make even something bigger and more grand?
Yes. Well, I got into mosaics a few years back as making mosaics as part of my healing journey. I didn't know that it would be as healing as it was at the time, but creating something from something that had shattered or been broken and making it more beautiful than it ever was to start. I found out about the Japanese art form shortly after that. And I was like, yes, I get it. This is so healing to be able to do that. And that's what it feels like maybe sometimes piecing our stories together in our life experience. And I help others share their story and do this. And it is like puzzle pieces. They come to me and they're like, I have no idea how my background, my expertise, and then my personal transformation go together. And I remember being in their seat of thinking, I have all this expertise in branding, but I have so much personal transformation that's happened in my life. And how do they forge together? And I think one, that it's very difficult to figure this out on your own. I think having a soundboard and mirror to reflect back is a very big, important part of the process, right? It can be hard to see our genius, hard to see what's valuable when we have these inherent gifts, right? I believe that everybody has a unique
Yes.
talent, and often we don't know what our unique talent is because we're like, this is just normal. This is just life. Can't everybody do this? And so I think that having that mirror is an important step. And then yeah, really after that, I mean, selecting the right stories and feeling into it feels like a very energetic and spiritual practice for me. It doesn't come from the head space, it comes from the heart space and being able to be connected to the audience and empathy, right? Empathy is a big part of what I do. I'm a crazy empath. It may not be surprising. I feel everything all the time, everywhere. And it used to be a shameful thing for me. I didn't understand why I would get, we have words for it now, overstimulated neurodivergent
Mhm.
spectrum. I didn't understand why I would feel the way that I felt. And then over time, by getting to know myself, I started to realize, well, hey, if not everybody is this sensitive, maybe not everybody is this empathetic, how can I use that? And by
Right.
understanding that's the second, part of my framework is after you know yourself, know your audience. What are they feeling? What do they need? And then coming from never losing your sense of individuality or authenticity, but looking through the lens of what they need to hear and then positioning your stories in that way is a huge part of it.
That's so I love that. Effectively knowing allows us to alchemize on our strengths rather than viewing them as something that separates us from others around us. Because we can have some very key strengths that ultimately are very different from those in our circles and spheres. So with that point of effectively learning how to alchemize, how do you kind of guide your clients in that process of alchemizing what they first viewed as weaknesses into strengths?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they come to me, they don't necessarily know they're coming to me to connect to their identity. And usually in the first conversation, they all utter a version of the words of like, I guess I don't really know who I am, or I'm wanting to develop my
Yeah.
identity. And they come to me thinking, I want to develop my brand voice. I want to be more confident on camera. I want help with
Yeah.
branding. And in that first conversation, they feel like they don't know their identity, but actually through space holding, active listening, they give me clues, right? I don't
Mhm.
feel that I'm doing anything often. I'm just holding space and reading patterns. And
Mm,
by being able to reflect certain things back, that's where being the mirror comes in. It's like, oh, yeah, trust is a big theme in my life. And I'm like, yeah, you said it
yes.
17 times. I imagine it is.
Yes. You're like, "That makes sense." That's so good. And then with the engaging with the audience, right? So step 1 is knowing yourself, step 2 is knowing your audience. How have you really encouraged them to kinda get down and dirty and get to know their people?
Yeah, well, I actually have an empathy map that helps
Mm,
go through if you're not naturally super empathetic. There are
mhm.
7 steps, 7 questions that you can ask to know your audience better, and hopes and dreams and fears and challenges. And it's just a very good lens to position your communication through. And then, actually, I'm sure you're very familiar with the exercise of the 5 whys. That's actually a great way to get to know yourself more, to be in more close communication with yourself. So, regardless of where you are in the timeline or of the journey of knowing yourself and your audience, there are tools that can help you be more empathetic both to yourself and then to your audience as well. And that's,
Can you
and let me state, your audience is not just if you're speaking on stage and have a big audience, right? Your audience is not just you on the other end of this. Often your audience is yourself because of that knowing. And often your audience are romantic relationships or family relationships. And these empathy tools help you be a
Yeah.
better communicator and have better relationships as well.
Yes.
It's been a fun journey to teach people communication because guess what? Any area of my life where I'm not a good communicator is going to be shaken up and out. And I used to not be great at romantic conversation. Be like, oh, emotions, they're too overwhelming. I don't know. I'm going to project everything on you. But when I kind of
Mm,
took myself through my own process of empathy in that situation, oh my
yes.
gosh, my romantic relationships will, when they are not good, they hurt our hearts and they affect everything else in our life.
Yes.
Same with family relationships. So being able to have that solid foundation of empathy at whatever level you need it for your
Mhm.
audience is just We all need this.
We all need this. I love it. Can you talk about the 5 whys? I love that.
Yeah, well, it's just about getting to the root of anything, right? It's very easy to, ask. So, for instance, what would your dream life look like 12 months from now?
Mm,
Envision as if the impossible weren't impossible. If the impossible spelled in the name right then and there is actually I'm possible.
mm.
What would your life look like in 12 months? And we can play. Do you have an answer?
Oh, 12 months from now. Okay, so that would be August of 2026. I do. I guess my book would be published and it would be out to the world. I haven't done a lot of speaking on stages in a little bit, so I'm looking to activate that more so. Um, I've got some personal things too. I probably will have, I guess, maybe moved. I don't know. I don't know. But those are
Well,
those things.
let's start with the first two. Your book is
Yeah.
out there. You're speaking on more stages. So I'm already seeing a pattern there. And I would ask you, well, why is having that expanded reach? Why does that
Hmm.
matter to you? So that's
It
the first
matters.
why.
So the first why, I have seen the devastating impacts of the lack of emotional health. And so
Mhm.
the reach is so critical because I believe in my heart of hearts that this message can really transform lives as it's transformed mine.
Yeah. And why is transforming lives important to you?
Mm. It's funny. I actually don't feel the need to be the conduit to do it, but I feel the need that it needs to happen. And so this is kind of the message.
Mhm.
And I've even worked with my team on this. And frankly, this is where I can get hung up. Like, it actually makes me nervous to be the one to be kind of the face of it. So I kind of like building up knowing to be have its own legs so that there can be other coaches. It can become a certification
Mhm.
program. It extends far
Yeah.
beyond me so that it's not limited to me.
Yeah. And just to keep playing, it's like, so
Yeah.
transformation, being the face of it is not necessarily important to me, but I understand that transformation needs to happen in our
Yes.
world. And then
Yeah.
so, and we can keep playing if you want, but
Yeah.
from there it would say, well, why does the world need to be transformed? And we would
Yeah.
go through it until we get to the root of what is intrinsically motivating you
Yeah.
versus maybe an ego dream. When it comes to
Yeah.
manifestation, that's a big part of it. Olympians use visualization as well as part of their training because it shows that the studies show the brain doesn't distinguish between is it happening in real life or am I running through it in my mind. And
Yeah.
so if we're trying to manifest something or go after this big dream, if our ego is driving and saying, well, I want the recognition because I want the book and the stages, it can be kind of
Yeah.
ego driven or appear to be. But when we go through the 5 whys and we connect to, well, the world needs to be transformed because the world's in trouble. And I feel like I have a
Yes.
message and I don't necessarily want to do it, but I feel called to do it. And I need to
Yeah.
get out there. That's a very different energy that you're
Yeah.
operating in. And energy is everything. So it
Yeah.
helps growth, it helps connection, it helps when things are hard and not going
Mhm.
your way, pick yourself up by the bootstraps and say, no, I'm going down this path because the world needs it versus I guess I don't really need, to get my book out there or go on bigger stages. It's easy to just sit here and not go after it.
It's the validation versus motivation.
It is.
That distinction is just really, really important because to your point, it will kick us in the pants when when we're not doing what we
Yeah.
should be doing. I feel very strongly like right now in my life, it's the time to be putting in the reps. And it's a very unsexy time of entrepreneurship and being a business owner, and it's sitting down and doing the work. And man, it's way more flashy to be having that scoreboard lit up, that scoreboard of our social media or the big wins
Mhm.
or playing on the field and actually seeing those numbers grow and grow rather than literally being in the training room. And so I think that with us being able to identify, am I being internally motivated or external validation propelled, pulling me out? And am I being rooted and grounded in a mission and passion, or is it ego?
Mhm.
So with that distinction, understanding it's the why, the 5 whys that allows for us to uncover the truth at the end of the day. Would you say that that's the case?
I would, yes. And
Yeah.
not only uncover the truth, but it uncover that, that little engine inside of us that pushes
Mm,
us through that unsexy time, because it is, and you're so right. And the influx of people right now who, the job market's unstable, the job market's hard to find. They
yeah.
see entrepreneur, I'm just going to use ChatGPT and build a framework and be an expert and use it to send all my emails. And it's so easy and it's so great. But if you're not in the training room, if you're not, doing the work, going through your shame and deepening vulnerability in the space that you can hold as a leader, if your story doesn't match what you're teaching, you don't have the depth.
Mhm.
And, so I think, yes, we're in a lot of disruption, but I think it's a beautiful time. Authentic connection has never been more highly valued,
Yes.
and every disruption comes great opportunity. So if you're
Mhm.
willing to do the work, I think that today you're going to succeed.
Mhm.
You got to do the unsexy part of developing
Yeah.
yourself as a leader. It can't just be, here's my message, this is what I'm going to teach you. It's like, no, I have lived this. And that's why the story part, and to wrap a
Yeah.
bow around it, the third principle is to know how to leverage your story.
Mm, that's so good. Knowing how to leverage your story, because when we're in an age of disruption, this is our opportunity to differentiate. The story is the greatest differentiator because there's a lot of noise. And to your point
Mhm.
of everyone's going in and becoming an expert using ChatGPT, it is wild how much opportunity there is to go faster. But to your
Mhm.
point, the greater the depth, the greater the guardrails to guide us in the right direction, propelled by our story. And to your point, not ego, not validation, not chasing for the sake of the
Mhm.
scoreboard lighting up. And so, man, it's the knowing of self, knowing our audience, and then knowing how to leverage our story. It's almost it adds in the guardrails and the roots that ground us so that we also don't get swept away by every single new tide in this age of disruption.
Mhm. Yes. And I loved hearing you repeat it back. I'm like, yes, that's it. And I'm getting full body chills. And I would say that when
Mhm.
you do those three things, not only will you have the intrinsic motivation to keep going, not only will you have the depth to really make an impact, but that is when you enter this portal, these quantum leaps that happen. And I know we're probably wrapping up our time soon, but for anybody local, come check out the keynote, because I will be talking about
Yeah.
impossible growth and the huge doors that can open. And I will share one with you. I don't all the way know why I haven't shared this publicly yet. I need to get on it. I need to get on my platforms and shout it from the rooftops. But since we last saw each other, Christine, I have been selected as a 2025 Best of Stage Smart Speaker in the life changing category. I am next to
Oh,
4-time Olympian athletes, global head of event companies, CSP
Christy.
speakers. It is such an honor.
Wow.
And it's an impossible opportunity, an impossible door that was open. Somebody nominated me. I thought, this is just an honor to be nominated. It will not go any further than this. There's a form online. I need to fill out a form. I'm not going to stand out against the thousands of people who are applying in this form and probably far more tapped into the event industry than I am, global heads of event companies,
Oh
Olympians. And from a place of, I
my God.
think, not overthinking it, I look
Mm,
back at my form and I'm like, it wasn't even grammatically correct. I just like
yes.
busted out my story. Why did you become a public speaker? I shared my story. I shared how I
Mm,
liberated 40 people from stage one day from their biggest fear, had them hold a mic, have them empower their voice. One went on to be award-winning speaker and anti-apartheid activist.
wow.
And that story is what put me on that page. Knowing
Mm,
myself, knowing my audience, and leveraging my story has helped me just skyrocket
mm,
again and again and again. And sometimes people listening, they're like, well, Christy, you've got an amazing story. I haven't traveled like that. I didn't liberate people like that. But I will
yeah.
remind you that captivating is in the delivery, not in what happens, and that
Mm,
everybody has a captivating story. You may just not see it or know how to leverage it. But I promise you, your story matters, and you never know what a gift it will be to somebody.
Christy, thank you so much for coming on today. I know that you're deep in the preparation for this keynote. I'm so excited. I wish I was local. I just know it's going to be fire. I already have benefited so much, even just from this conversation. And
So kind.
really grateful for you. So grateful for the way you're championing people to be able to access these deep parts of them, because it's so critically important.
Yes, thank you so much. You're so kind, and I've enjoyed this conversation. I hope there's many more conversations in our future. I feel like I could just, you're such a good host and so gracious. We could talk forever.
We could talk forever. Thank you, my